Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive into current events. This one's especially important if you're prepping for the UPSC exams, because today we're tackling India's economy. Specifically, the kind of strange situation with private investment. It's been declining, and that has big implications for the country's future. To get a clearer picture, we're looking at two sources today, articles from the Hindu and Indian Express, and they've got some interesting and sometimes opposing viewpoints on this.
It really is a bit of an economic puzzle right now. On one hand, you've got the government trying to stimulate investment. They're using things like tax breaks and cutting interest rates. And there are some early signs that it might be working, like FMCG companies are getting more orders, which suggests they're expecting people to start spending more.
So there's some optimism, right? Like we might be turning a corner.
Exactly. But then you dig into the data, and it gets more complicated.
How so?
Overall investment has actually grown, but private investment shrunk last quarter. And this isn't a new thing either. If you look back over the last decade, private investment's been steadily declining. That's a pretty long slump.
Okay, so we've got this contradiction. The government trying to boost investment, a few hopeful signs, and yet this persistent decline in private investment. For our listeners out there, especially those UPSC aspirants, this is a trend you really need to grasp. Why is this happening, and what does it mean for India's economic goals? First things first, why is private investment so crucial for economic growth? What makes it so special?
Well, private investment does more than just pump money into the economy. It drives innovation, creates new businesses and industries, and that leads to jobs. In the long run, it boosts productivity for the whole country. It's not just about companies expanding, it's about creating a more dynamic economy overall.
Like a ripple effect, right? One investment leads to another, and the whole economy benefits.
Exactly. Now, here's something that often trips people up, and it's important if you're studying for the UPSC. There's this idea that private investment is directly linked to how much money people save in banks.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. More savings equals more money for investment.
Right, but it's not that straightforward. Private investment actually depends on how much credit banks are giving out. Banks create credit, which basically means they give loans to businesses, and those loans allow businesses to invest, expand, and grow.
So it's not about money just sitting in bank accounts. It's about how actively banks are lending that money out.
Precisely. And if you look at the numbers, it's pretty striking. When India's economy was booming, bank credit was growing at around 22%. Now it's around 9%. That's a huge drop, and it directly affects how much private investment is happening.
This is a really important point for anyone studying economics, especially for the UPSC exam. The link between credit growth and private investment is key to understanding India's economic picture. So we've established that private investment is vital and that bank credit plays a big role. But the big question is, why is private investment so sluggish right now? Our sources offer two possible explanations.
The first one focuses on weak consumer demand. The argument is that businesses won't invest if people aren't spending enough. If consumers aren't buying, companies have no reason to expand or try new things.
So it's a chicken and egg problem. Which comes first, the investment or the demand? And that's where the recent tax break comes in. The government wants to boost consumer spending by giving people more disposable income. Specifically, incomes up to 12 lakh are now tax-free.
Right. The hope is that people will spend that extra money, and businesses will see that demand and start investing to meet it.
But there's another argument, right? One that focuses on policy uncertainty.
That's the second explanation, and it suggests that demand isn't the only problem. The bigger issue is whether businesses feel confident enough to invest for the long term. Inconsistent government policies, a lack of major reforms, and just general uncertainty about the future can scare investors away, especially those looking for stability.
So it's not just about demand. It's about creating an environment where businesses feel secure enough to make those big long-term investments. And our sources mention that analysts find this explanation a lot more convincing than just weak consumer demand. So we have these two contrasting viewpoints. Weak consumer demand versus policy uncertainty. Both make sense, but which one is the main culprit?
Well, to figure that out, we need to look at some historical data, and this is where things get really interesting.
Ooh, a plot twist. Time for some economic detective work. Tell me more.
Traditionally, private investment and consumption have this interesting relationship. They usually move in opposite directions. When one goes up, the other tends to go down, like a seesaw. But lately, we've seen something unusual. Both are declining at the same time.
That's definitely not what we'd expect. It goes against the usual pattern and adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation. For anyone studying for the UPSC, this is something to pay attention to. It could easily show up on the prelims or mains exam.
Absolutely. It suggests there might be other factors at play beyond just demand and policy uncertainty that are contributing to this simultaneous decline. We need to look beyond the surface level explanations to really understand what's going on.
Okay, so we've set the stage, identified the main players, and found some intriguing clues. But we're far from solving the mystery of India's declining private investment. We need to dig deeper and explore potential solutions.
So yeah, this simultaneous decline in both investment and consumption, it's a real departure from what we usually see, and it hints that there might be some deeper underlying issues affecting India's economy.
Right, and for all you UPSC aspirants out there, this kind of unexpected trend is important. Understanding these nuances, these things that don't fit the usual pattern, that's key for tackling those tricky exam questions, both in prelims and mains. But going back to our puzzle, if both weak demand and policy uncertainty are factors, how do we reverse this trend? How do we get private investment going again?
Well, boosting consumer demand, that's not a simple fix. It's not just about putting more money in people's pockets, although things like that tax break we talked about, that can definitely help. It's also about creating a sense of confidence in the economy.
What do you mean?
People need to feel secure in their jobs. We need to address income inequality. These things contribute to financial stability, and that encourages people to spend.
It's like a cycle, right? More spending leads to business growth, more jobs, higher incomes, and that leads to even more spending. But let's stick with this policy uncertainty issue for a minute. If that's really holding back investors, what needs to change? What would make them feel comfortable enough to invest for the long term?
Imagine investors as marathon runners, right? They need to know the route's clear, the rules aren't going to change mid-race, and the finish line is worth the effort. They're not interested in quick sprints, they're in it for the long haul, and that's where policy stability is so important.
So it's about predictability, transparency. Investors need to trust that the government's policies will stay consistent, that they won't get hit with sudden changes or roadblocks they didn't see coming. And for our UPSC folks, this ties into policy analysis, right? What specific reforms could give investors that confidence they need to make those long-term commitments in India?
Absolutely. One big step would be to streamline regulations, cut down on the red tape. Navigating all the rules and procedures in India can be a real headache. It takes forever, and that can really discourage investors who are looking for a more straightforward, predictable system.
Less bureaucracy, got it. Anything else?
Tax policies. They need to be clear, consistent, and predictable too. If they keep changing or there's a lot of ambiguity, that creates uncertainty. Investors get nervous. A stable, transparent tax system is really important for building trust and encouraging long-term investment.
So it's all about creating a welcoming, stable environment for businesses, making India a place where they feel good about setting up shop, growing, and not worrying about sudden policy shifts or unexpected rule changes. But beyond those big picture things, are there any specific sectors that could be key to getting private investment back on track and driving economic growth? Any particular areas where India has an advantage?
Definitely. Infrastructure, for example, investing in roads, railways, ports, energy infrastructure. Those things create jobs right away, but they also lay the groundwork for future growth.
It's like building the backbone of a strong economy,
Yeah.
making it easier for businesses to transport things, reach markets, and expand without a lot of hassle or expense.
Exactly. And then there's the manufacturing sector. India could be a global manufacturing hub, but it needs investment, especially in technology and skills development. And we need to create a more competitive business environment.
So attracting those big companies, the ones that can create lots of jobs and really boost India's standing in the global market. But to get them here, we need an environment that supports their growth. What would that look like?
We need a whole ecosystem that fosters excellence in manufacturing. That means investing in research and development, encouraging innovation, and having training programs that meet the specific needs of the manufacturing sector. And of course, the regulations need to make sense for businesses with clear policies that encourage investment and innovation.
It all sounds promising, but let's be real. Getting private investment back on track and making India a global manufacturing leader, that's not going to happen overnight. It's a long process, right?
You're absolutely right. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Both the government and the private sector need to be in it for the long haul. It's about building trust, working together, and having a shared vision for where India's economy is headed.
And that, everyone, is the heart of our discussion today. We've explored the challenges, looked at how complex this issue is, and seen some glimmers of hope. But we can't stop here. We need to keep asking tough questions, considering different perspectives, and finding solutions.
And for our UPSC folks, remember, this isn't just about passing an exam. It's about understanding what drives our country's economy and preparing to be leaders who can make a difference. The insights and analytical skills you develop while studying for the UPSC, those will be invaluable as you navigate the complexities of India's economic landscape.
Absolutely. Okay, so to wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's shift our focus to finding solutions and mapping out a path forward for India's economic growth. All right, welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. So far, we've been talking about the decline in private investment in India and how it's not a simple issue to fix.
Yeah, we saw how this drop in investment isn't following the usual patterns, and that points to some deeper problems in the economy that we need to address.
Exactly. And for our UPSC folks, this is a perfect example of how economic trends don't always follow the textbook. It shows how important it is to really dig into the data, understand the historical context, and think critically about what shapes economic behavior. But the question is, can India really turn this around? Can we get private investment back on track and get the economy growing strongly again?
It's definitely a challenge, but it's not impossible. India's economy has gone through ups and downs before, and we've always found a way to adapt and recover. The key is to learn from what's happened in the past, figure out what's holding us back now, and come up with solutions that work.
That's encouraging. So what's the next step? What concrete actions can be taken to get private investment flowing again and ensure that growth is sustainable? What can India do to attract investors and make them feel confident about making those long-term commitments?
Well, as we talked about earlier, consistency and predictability in government policies are absolutely essential. Investors need to feel certain that the rules of the game aren't going to change on them suddenly, that their investments are secure. That sense of stability is crucial if we want to attract those long-term investments.
So no more flip-flopping, a more consistent long-term vision, right? But what about specific sectors? Where should the focus be in terms of drawing in that private investment? Where does India have the potential to really stand out and create opportunities for growth?
Infrastructure is a great place to start. Investing in things like roads, railways, ports, energy infrastructure, not only does that create jobs immediately, but it also sets the stage for future economic growth. It's like building the essential systems that a healthy economy needs to function properly.
Yeah, I see the analogy. A strong infrastructure makes it easier for businesses to operate, move goods around, and connect with markets both within India and internationally. But beyond infrastructure, what other areas have potential?
Manufacturing is another big one. India has what it takes to be a global manufacturing powerhouse. We need investments in technology, skills development, and we need to make the business environment more competitive.
So the goal is to attract those major companies, the ones that can create a lot of jobs and really elevate India's position in the global market. But to do that, we need to create an environment where they can thrive. What would that involve?
We need to build a complete ecosystem that supports excellence in manufacturing, investing in research and development, promoting innovation, having training programs that specifically meet the needs of the manufacturing sector. And of course, the regulations need to make sense for businesses with policies that encourage investment and innovation.
Okay, all that makes sense.
Okay.
But attracting foreign investment is important too, right?
Yeah.
How can India become a more appealing destination for global companies that are looking to set up manufacturing operations?
That's where making things easier for businesses and making the whole system more transparent becomes really crucial. Cutting down on red tape, streamlining those approval processes, creating a more predictable and transparent environment for regulations, those things can make a huge difference in attracting foreign investment.
So it's about sending a clear message. India is open for business. We want you here, and we're committed to creating an environment where you can succeed. But shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the agricultural sector. It plays a massive role in India's economy. What can we do there?
Modernizing India's agricultural sector is key, bringing in more technology, improving infrastructure, and making sure farmers have access to finance. Those things can unlock a ton of potential for growth and job creation.
That's a great point. Agriculture is the backbone of the Indian economy, and empowering our farmers can have positive effects across so many other areas. But it's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's about having smart policies and incentives that will attract private investment, right? We need to create that ecosystem where businesses can flourish.
Exactly. Things like streamlining regulations, getting rid of unnecessary bureaucracy, offering tax incentives. Those can make India much more attractive for foreign investment. It's about creating a level playing field and ensuring that India can compete globally for those investment dollars.
And developing a skilled workforce through education and training is vital too, right?
Yeah.
Investors want to know they'll have a talented pool of workers to draw from.
Absolutely. Investing in human capital is just as important as investing in physical infrastructure. We need a workforce that's prepared for the jobs of the future, a workforce that's adaptable, skilled, and ready to tackle whatever comes next.
So it's a big picture approach, focusing on all aspects of the economy.
Mm.
But what about the overall investment climate? What can we do to make India stand out as a great place to invest? What message does India need to send to the rest of the world to build confidence and attract that investment?
Transparency and ease of doing business are critical. Investors have to feel confident that the system is fair, straightforward, and predictable. That means tackling things like corruption, strengthening our legal system, and making sure contracts are enforced.
It's about creating a fair and level playing field where everyone, domestic and foreign investors alike, can compete based on merit and operate with confidence. It's about building a system grounded in fairness, transparency, and the rule of law.
Precisely, and never underestimate the importance of a stable political environment. Investors are much more likely to put their money into a country where they believe the government is stable, policies are consistent, and the rule of law is upheld.
Makes perfect sense. No one wants to invest in a place where the future feels shaky or unpredictable. A stable and predictable political environment is really essential for giving investors that confidence they need to make those long-term commitments.
You got it. So to wrap up, getting private investment back on track in India requires a multi-pronged approach. We need to create the right policy environment, focus on key sectors, build a skilled workforce, and ensure transparency and stability. It's about building a comprehensive ecosystem that supports growth, innovation, and long-term prosperity.
And it's about having a long-term vision, not just quick fixes for short-term gains. We need ambitious goals and sustainable solutions that will benefit everyone for generations to come.
That's it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And it takes commitment from both the government and the private sector. We have to work together, be innovative, and share a vision for a brighter future.
Well said. And for our UPSC aspirants, remember, this isn't just something you read in a textbook. These are real-world challenges facing our economy. By understanding them, you're preparing yourself to be leaders who can tackle these challenges head-on and make a positive difference. The knowledge and skills you develop while studying for the UPSC will be incredibly valuable as you help shape India's economic future.
So, as we finish up this deep dive, I want you to think about this. What role do you see yourself playing in India's economic future? Whether you become a policymaker, an entrepreneur, or just an engaged citizen, what actions can you take to contribute to a more dynamic and inclusive economy?
That's a great question to reflect on. And remember, our conversation doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving for a better future. We'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas in the comments section.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your fellow UPSC enthusiasts and anyone interested in understanding how India's economy works. The Hindu and Indian Express, our sources for today's discussion, are great resources for staying informed about current events and getting in-depth analysis on all sorts of topics. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.